We should first say hey. We should say welcome.
You know what humans do? They say hello and then they say maybe their name.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Designer Will See You Now podcast. My name is Ola, and
And yeah, I'm Bella.
yeah, we started this podcast as two designers who are either actively working or have worked in health tech. And what we really wanted to do was give people an opportunity to look under the hood of the medical products that they use even day to day or when they go and have doctor's visits or have to manage their health, and see what the design process and the thinking is behind these products so they don't feel like such a black box. And something that we want to keep in mind is we're going to have, doctors on here, medical professionals. We're going to talk about these solutions at a technical level and at a medical level. But ultimately, we don't want this to feel like a tech conference, and we don't want it to feel like we are pulling teeth when we're talking about these things. We want it to feel like when your friends who are really passionate about something just go off about it and you become passionate about it by extension, because there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of really interesting insights that I think anyone would love to kind of understand about the products that they use every day. So, yeah. And
Definitely. Yeah. And if I could just add to that, just that I I think I think we, if I can speak for both of us, that everybody is a designer or can be a designer. And I think that's also something we want to inject into this, that invite people into the design world that kind of before maybe thought of themselves as not creative enough or not like techie enough, or because that's not true at the end of the day. Um, yeah.
yeah, no, that's a great point. I think in both tech and in the medical field, these are industries that feel so gate kept, right?
Mm,
It feels like, in obviously in medicine, you need multiple years of schooling to be able to actually even work in the medical field, which is important. It should be
definitely.
that way. But it can feel very inaccessible to some, I think for certain people, especially, one of our main pillars with this podcast is really focusing on advocacy and empowering patients to have the information and the knowledge about these different tools and solutions so that they can then have a collaborative conversation with their doctor rather than it feeling like their doctor is just telling them what they're going to do now and or what they're
Hmm.
going to take. And then likewise with tech, I think that there is this culture of better than sometimes in tech
Mm,
and not having that transparency with what the actual process is for building these solutions. So, yeah, I think that's a great call out too. That, at the end of the day, we're not doing anything that, anyone else couldn't participate in.
right.
Yeah.
No, definitely. Should we rewind a little bit? And I wanted to, can you just tell the audience about yourself really quick? We should
Yes,
just introduce ourselves.
of course. So as I said, my name is Ola. I am a UX UI designer. I have worked in health tech before, actually with Bella, and that's what really sparked my passion for health tech. On the side, I like to do more kind of traditional art. I actually don't work with digital mediums a lot outside of my work. And that's mostly just because I stare at screens all day. What about you, Bella?
Yeah, I'm Bella, like you said, and I design a medtech product for managing asthma at a company called Medituner. Um, the way I kind of explain it is like what testing your blood sugar is for if you have diabetes. We do that, but for asthma. So just having a better overview of how you're feeling, rather than just that one checkup a year. But we'll get into more of that later. In my free time, I'm also very creative and try to work more with physical products. Yeah, and a lot of industrial design, photography, that kind of thing.
So going off the back of that, what got you into design?
So my grandfather he was a patent artist, but also just an artist in general, no, sorry, patent illustrator and an artist. So he would, like whenever somebody would file for a patent, he would do the very like technical illustrations, um, for whatever that invention was. And early on, he was the person who taught me how to paint and sculpt. There was no medium that he didn't just kind of try out, and had no problem just jumping into it and seeing what would happen. So he kind of passed that on to me, because I also love working with just different mediums, and trying them out and experimenting a little bit. So I think that's the source of my kind of art meets mechanical form follows function, um, background. And yeah, I went to school for industrial design originally. But unless you want to work at Volvo or the big companies like that in Sweden, uh, yeah, you kind of end up in tech. So that's how I ended up at working with more UX and UI and digital solutions. What about you, Ola? How'd you get into design?
Well, I will just make a side note here to
Yeah,
set context that you are in Sweden
I am
and
in
I
Sweden.
am
This
in the
is
US.
so true. Yeah, that was a really good. Yeah.
When you said Volvo, I was like, okay, you're betraying
Sweden.
your Swedishness right now.
Yeah, yeah. Good
But
catch.
yeah,
Good catch.
so Bella is in Sweden. I am in the US. Bella did live for a while in the US. I lived for a while in Sweden. So I'm sure that we will be also including our perspectives and our experience with both the Swedish/European healthcare system and the US healthcare system as we talk about these different solutions because it's very difficult to obviously separate these out from the products that we use.
Very good point.
But as far as what got me into design, um, similarly, from a young age, love to do art. It's always been something I've been drawn towards, but when I went to university, I ended up opting into engineering. I just figured more career opportunities, and I didn't associate tech and engineering with being creative, really. Or okay, I will, just so nobody says anything. It is a very creative field. Coding can be a very creative output for a lot of people, but just not for me, not in that kind of typical artistic sense. And I realized, towards the end of my bachelor's, I can't do this for my entire life. And I started looking into opportunities that I could branch into that were a little bit more aligned creatively. And I ended up finding UX design, product design, whatever you want to call it, but definitely more digitally focused. And I was in love because it was this intersection of tech and art and psychology as well, which I think is one of the most interesting parts of UX design and something that we'll touch on a lot in terms of health tech. And I mean, I think that's what people don't also associate it with too much. They think it's clinical, but it's so emotional. But sorry, I'm going off now. But yes, ultimately, that finding UX was this enlightenment moment where I realized that this was the perfect kind of trifecta of that art, psychology, and tech. And I've been doing it ever since, and I love it. So, yeah. Now, as someone who has been designing for many years now,
Oh,
what are
so
three
many.
words? What are three words that describe your design philosophy? And I love your thinking on this. I think that side note, Bella is the most talented designer I know, and the most like the most theoretically kind of inspiring designer I know. Like I think the way that you think about design is it motivates me to be a better designer. So sorry,
Oh,
go
that's so
ahead.
nice. What a nice thing to say. Thank you. And I also love the question. When I saw this, I was like, "Oh, this is really a nice little question to sink my teeth into." It's also a good reminder. I think it's important to just ask yourself this as a designer, just on the regular, to kind of check in with yourself. Like, okay, what's my design philosophy now? Because of course, like things change, the world changes, you change as a person, and your worldview, of course. So I think actually it's a really nice thing to ask yourself now and then. Um, my design philosophy is don't make poison. And I think this comes from a design activist who originally was a fashion designer and a UX designer, UI designer. Her name is Céline Seman, and she has this quote where she says, everything you make turns into either food or poison. And this goes for everything. Like everything we make, everything we manufacture, produce, put out into the world, basically. And when she says that, she's talking about how design should be responsible, it should be ethical, it should be human centered. And when you stray away from design, not taking into account, like you mentioned, like the emotions of a person, where your users are, or where people are on an individual level and as a whole, then like the risk is that you start straying into poison. So I think, yeah, I try to keep that in mind. Like, and also, I guess there's so many different things you can ask yourself, like the, like just because we can doesn't mean we should kind of thing in tech, where we get really excited about the possibilities, um, and make things just for the sake of making things, but without really thinking through, okay, who's going to use this and how exactly is it going to impact their life? So yeah, I try to boil it down to whatever I do on a daily basis. Just don't be making poison. Um, Try to keep it simple. What about you? What's your design philosophy?
Yeah, no, I think that's like I love just the simplicity of that. Obviously, like you said, it's boiling down a very big concept, but just like you said, taking the time to reflect on what your output is, and it's almost like the antithesis to move fast and break things,
Mm,
which is like the typical, Silicon Valley tech bro kind of way of approaching design. And I think my three words I ended up choosing are I wanted something a little bit more punchy, so I said shut up and listen. But
oh,
obviously that's four. But so let's say listen to understand. And I think it it 100% aligns with what you're saying where if you especially the human-centered aspect, if you're not considering the impact on the users that you have or how they're going to use this product and keeping in mind their needs and their wants, there's not like what are you doing it for? And I think there have been so many moments that I've been again surprised talking to users and the way first of all, how variable it can be user to user, I'll say person to person, how they use even products where you might make a simple assumption. A lot of times, the way that you expect that someone's going to react or use your product does not end up being the way that they use it. And I think that oftentimes we don't have enough consideration for people's lifestyles and disabilities and the backgrounds that they come from culturally. All of these things impact the way that they interact with the solutions that we put in front of them. And I think that, obviously, we've mentioned a little bit the collaboration aspect, and that's really what this podcast is about. It's
Mm.
inviting users in and giving them a seat at the table, the same way that, designers have been fighting for a seat at the table in tech for a while. It's really also about not then making ourselves the gatekeepers either. It's about bringing the users with us. And we, in a lot of ways, are the representatives of the users, and the only way we can do that is if we don't make assumptions. And I think, as if we're going to expand this out, I think this is important for people just as a whole right now, regardless of if you're a designer or not, really to challenge yourself to stop and to slow down and to
Mm.
listen to people, and to try to not just listen as in you're taking it in, but really try to listen in order to understand where they're coming from and what the ultimate point is. Because oftentimes, also, and any user researcher will tell you this, people can say, oh, I want to, for example, there's the classic example with Ford and the carriage versus
Yeah.
the horse, right? The user will say, I want to add more horses or whatever to my carriage. But if you're listening to that, that's their suggestion for how to improve the product. But if you're really listening, what they're saying is that they want to go faster. And so, is that the most efficient solution for what they need, or is there something else that could actually work better, for example, than moving to like designing the car? So yeah, I think listen to understand is kind of what I landed on for that reason. That was so long. I'm
No,
definitely gonna
I
cut
love
a
that. I
lot of
love that.
that.
I think it was a really good point you made too about like not like now that we do get a seat at the table a lot more than like just a couple of years ago, honestly. To then not just slip into a gatekeeping role ourselves. I think that's a really, really good point because I can see it so easily happening. You just want to be like one of the people at the table, and then of course, like you'll slip into it without even really thinking about it. So I think it's a really good uh, question to also reflect on yourself. Um,
Yeah, it's like, are you just pacifying the stakeholders,
yeah,
or are you actually advocating for
right, right,
users?
yeah.
Cool. And obviously, this is a health tech podcast. We've been talking about design a lot, as a whole, but our focus is going to be within the health tech space and our insights as health tech designers. So for you, Bella, what got you into health tech?
So I got into health tech as or if I back up to, I was fresh out of uni where I had just spent a semester in China in the manufacturing hub for electronics. I want to say like if you pick up any piece of tech that's a physical product, there's a really good chance that it's been um, manufactured in this town that I was writing my thesis in, and that thesis was about vertical farming. Uh, and I really love that. My I grew up with a lot of plants. My mom is a big gardener, so I also really love plants, and I really love the idea of bringing more plants into your space and biophilia and how much humans feel so much better with some greenery around them. Exhibit A, we both got a couple of plants, I think. Um, so I was so set on that. I was so into I'm gonna be a little vertical farmer. I'm gonna make a product physical product that fits into the home space and make it more of a decorative piece than like a piece of like just tech. I was doing that. I had so much fun, and then it was time to go home to Sweden, and and it's yeah, I was really trying to find some kind of um industrial design job where I could work with physical products, and I definitely wanted a bit more of like a smaller company. Um, so I just started trying to hit up Stockholm's tech scene, which is huge, as many people already know. And what I found was a tiny company of 4 people where they were working on, it was started by two medical professionals. Um, in the field of allergies and asthma and just respiratory conditions. And they had this little Bluetooth. They had a little prototype that they really wanted to get on the market, and it was going to make their jobs easier, dealing with just having day-to-day conversations with patients and helping them, and just teaching them more about their own asthma, their own bodies. And that really resonated with me. I was really like, wow, that's such a cool way to have an impact on somebody's day or somebody's life, to help them, yeah, help them understand their bodies more. Uh, and that you shouldn't need to be a medical professional yourself to, yeah, to know what's going on in your own body. I really think that was a big thing for me, hearing at the interview or hearing about the company, that like, wow, they're doing some really cool things for people with this chronic condition that's really common too. Like I think 10 or 12% of people have, percent of the population has asthma. But anyway, yeah, I went to the interview, and I was like, oh, this sounds like a cool thing. I wasn't thinking like long term at all. I was just like, I just need a little job out of uni. Um, and I think at the time I wasn't even aware of how small the company was, or how big, like how much of a startup it was. Uh, and I remember thinking at the interview that the last question that they had for me was like, don't you want to ask us about our weekends or something like that? And I was just like, oh, these people are so fun. Like, I really like them.
Classic.
Yeah, yeah. And I was like, oh, sorry, how was your weekend? And then we all kind of laughed about it, and everyone seemed really sweet. And so I was the fifth person into this little startup. Yeah, we were working like in a little basement at a tech hub, in central Stockholm. And, yeah, so I was the only designer on that team, for a good while. And, yeah, I've been developing, our product Asthma Tuner ever since. I'm sure I could talk about this for years and years and years, but yeah, I'm sure
I mean,
I'll drop it.
I did want to kind of follow up though
Yeah.
with I mean, we wanted to at some point in this episode define what health tech actually
Mm.
is. And so when you talk about working in health tech, what is that to you?
Ooh. I think that, yeah, I already kind of touched on it. That it's that idea of, helping people understand their own bodies. You're living in your body, so you should have the tools through medical professionals, like with the help of them or with their support, to understand your own body and what works for it, what doesn't, what's helping you, and what you need to work on. Yeah, and we only have one body, right? And it's the thing that stays with us our whole lives. So yeah, and I also think it also, in a setting where you are working with or collaborating with a, medical professional, it it gives you that confidence to advocate yourself, so it doesn't just become like you mentioned earlier, that a doctor or a nurse is kind of telling you what you need to do. And it really, so giving patients just the confidence to understand what's going on with them, then that helps them understand the treatment options that you have. And yeah, but what isn't working for you, and what is, and what things you might want to try. So it's not just following orders. It's you understanding how you need to take care of yourself. What about you? Tell me about how you got into health tech.
Well, I had actually had some interaction with MetaTuner through a university project that I did with them before Bella even joined, and I did that project with them. Thought there would be a job offer at the end. There wasn't. That's cool. Whatever. I'm
Oh.
not salty about it at all. Like 8 years later, um, but then I at that point, I was still doing engineering. And when I shifted into more UX design, I was looking for opportunities. And I remembered that I had previously worked with a startup, which was working on this cool product that had a positive impact. And just out of the blue decided to look up to see if they had any opportunities, and there weren't any listings for designers, but I saw that a new designer had joined the team, and that was Bella. And so I literally did find Bella just online, screenshotted her photo, and sent it to the CTO and said, if I would love to work with her. If there's any opportunities, then please let me know. And that basically opened up the doors to then interning at MetaTuner, working with Bella a lot, and was so helpful, not just from the perspective of design, but also from the perspective of opening my eyes really to what the healthcare industry needs in terms of design, and all the opportunities there are to have a really big impact on the way that people live their lives, and their kind of day to day emotional state when it comes to their health. I mean, having a condition that you're dealing with, it's the most vulnerable that we're ever going to be as human beings. It's the like our biggest point of weakness. And so helping people to feel like they can face the fact that they have this condition, and then feel empowered that they can actually manage it, and it's not going to have a really negative impact on their life, uh, or the things that they can do day to day, or the way that they feel about themselves even, was really eye-opening, as I mentioned, from kind of an emotional standpoint, working in a field that typically is viewed as being really clinical. And I think that having that initial understanding within the context of the asthma tuner product then prompted me to start seeing more opportunities. I focused a lot on, when I was doing my thesis in university, I focused a lot on how to persuade is a strong word, how to motivate motivate people to manage their chronic conditions, and especially in the context of like pediatric care, seeing the fact that we can actually impact people in this way, and really help them do one of the hardest things, which is making those behavioral changes in your day-to-day life. Um, Really showed me also that the impact that we can have with our solutions. It's not just this app that you open up and you use and whatever. And no, we're really being mindful about the ways that we can help support people in this self-management, and really give them the agency to, as you mentioned, kind of take control of their health and take control of their body. And then past that, I would love to pursue more solutions focused on certain issues within the healthcare space. One is with helping connect people to providers are uh, that are catered to their specific conditions. Something that I've heard a lot within my own personal life from people that I know who are dealing with long-term chronic conditions is how isolating it can be as a patient to go to a provider and then hear, we don't know exactly what's wrong with you, and then to have to go on this wild goose chase yourself, on top of already dealing with
Mm.
the the physical and mental drain of being sick, to then having to also navigate the healthcare system and trying to find providers. And this is one of those opportunities where, as designers, we can step in and we can say, how do we help users feel supported, and how do we help them feel like they can advocate for themselves and they're not alone in all of this? Because I think that again, when you're sick and you're trying to navigate the healthcare system, it can feel very isolating and lonely. And then I guess I'll set also context a little bit for what I think health tech is. And as you mentioned, it is definitely giving users more more charge over their body. And I think the way that I break it down in like a practical sense, it's making the healthcare system more efficient or helping collect or present data for patients and doctors or assisting with treatments. I think it's those three things that health tech typically covers. And then when we talk about what a good health tech product is, I think it's really how it operates within those three pillars. And so when it comes to efficiency within the system, it's doing so without sacrificing empathy or patient privacy. And when it comes to dealing with collecting user data, it's about fostering better understanding between patients and providers and empowering patients. And finally, when it comes to the treatment, then it's about having it really fit into people's lives. And that's where we kind of circle back to the listening piece and understanding people's lifestyles and making sure that we're adapting and designing for them and not the other way around. It's not about them now having to adapt to our solution and force it into their lives. Yeah, any thoughts from you on what kind of makes a good health tech product?
I think you touched on a ton of good points there that just, yeah, meeting a patient where they are. And I think another thing I'll just add to is the fact that the healthcare industry is very medical professional heavy in the way we experience products and services. It's a completely different language. These professionals go to school, obviously, for a really long time and learn to speak a certain way and think in a certain way. Um, because they have to. There's a lot of knowledge and skills that you have to build up. Um, and then they go out and meet somebody who might have literally never come into contact with the healthcare system ever in their lives and speak none of that lingo and not know anything about the procedure for even just visiting a clinic. I mean, if we're going to go on the basic level, like some people are coming into contact with this for the first time in their lives, and like you said, they're most vulnerable. Um, so no, I thought you worded it really well.
No,
Um,
but 100% like I love what you touched on with the like lingo and the semantics and everything in the medical field because I feel like that especially in medicine, it's like sometimes you want to just ask your doctor like what does that mean? And when
yeah.
you have a doctor that doesn't have good bedside manners, it's like
Mm,
it drives me crazy. It can like, yes, you're technically helping me, but at the same time,
mm,
I'm coming out of this feeling like I either don't know what's going on or I am have been condescended to. And I
mm.
think you expect this is another thing that I mentioned with the way that you approach talking about health tech, I think is it's like delicious the way you can phrase like these concepts that in a way that feels so understandable for everyone and I think can really there's like a human connection there when you talk about health tech that I feel like is so it's missing so badly from health tech, you know? It's I mean even the term health tech is
Yeah,
terrible.
what is that?
Yeah.
What even is health tech? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I think just to touch on what you said, like feeling the way you feel leaving a consultation or leave feeling or yeah, feel leaving a just a reading your medical records, like you go away feeling kind of stupid after. Like I had
Literally.
a usability test with somebody, and that's really stuck in my mind where I think I asked a really basic question of like how tell me about like how um your consultations go when you talk to your provider about your asthma, and uh she worded it like I in the conversation she she did her best to like just kind of almost people please, be like, yeah, and okay, got it. Yeah, that sounds really good. And then leave, and on the bus home or on the train home, just like I think the quote was, I Google all my stupid questions. that I actually would have
Yeah.
wanted to ask, but like, and it doesn't have to mean that the provider was like creating an environment that made her feel stupid, but just I think the whole like healthcare industry is, like I said before, like very geared toward just the clinical side of it, the technical side of it, the really cool advanced technology and testing and procedures and everything that we can do. But I think, yeah, like you're saying, it's really important to just check ourselves and be like, okay, but is the person who has zero health literacy and zero experience with the medical field, like how is that person gonna react to that? It's you're gonna walk away feeling stupid. And that's not
Yeah.
how we want anyone to feel about any kind of interaction. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think that I could that's another topic. I love that topic. It's really interesting. And there's a lot
Yeah.
we can do there.
And I completely agree. And I think I like that you brought up the health literacy piece of it too, because I think it's so important to keep in mind that studies show that communities that are tend to be less health literate and might not go to a doctor as much or might not have as much access to the latest medical devices, wearables, whatever that, you know, people in more health literate communities might have access to or might know about, they are also the ones who tend to be the most averse to taking part in studies and clinical research. And so, who are we designing for? You know,
Mm.
like, yes, you might get a lot of great insights from someone who is really on top of their health, but ultimately, if we're not also designing for the communities that are not going to be as comfortable with that right off the bat, then we're only going to have greater disparity between those who are less health literate and more health literate over time. And as the healthcare industry starts to adopt more and more of these kind of innovative tech solutions. So that was a great kind of call out that you made as well. Um,
Definitely
cool.
the way it's gonna just the disparity is gonna increase exponentially. Yeah, we have to really check ourselves in this moment and make sure we're bringing as many people along for the ride as we can. And there's a lot of work to be done to achieve that.
Yeah, check yourself is
Check yourself.
is the mantra for 2025 as designers. I guess we can talk a little bit just to kind of wrap up, talk about what's, unique about designing for health tech and how that relates to the podcast and what users, oh my God, what the audience can expect kind of moving forward as we discuss health tech from a designer's perspective.
I love that you slip it. I also caught myself earlier slipping into the word users
I
because
know, and it's
these are
like
so intertwined.
there's also no really good word.
There
Users
isn't.
sounds so alienating, like you're
Yeah.
other. Patients sounds terrible because
Mm.
as we've discussed previously with MetaTuner work, it kind of reaffirms that these people are sick, you know? And then it's just customers I hate.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree. There's really no good term. I've seen people try to throw around like the word members, and I can
Mm.
appreciate what they're trying to do with it, but it also, at the end of the day, I totally agree with you. It's still there's still no word that we have to describe what we should be calling humans, but in a way that's like that also
Them
feels like weird
people.
saying that. Yeah, people. Can we call them people?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, no, users is such a nasty word in that way, but the way, I wonder what my count per day of saying the word users is. Uh,
Yeah. But yeah, so what do you feel like is unique about designing for health tech?
for health tech, especially, I think we touched on a lot of stuff. Like you said before about how you're coming into contact with somebody in their most vulnerable state. And also the fact that we have a third. I think there's so many different types of people that are involved in health tech. You've got the person who's the medical profession who you also have to account for because they're also involved in the care of this person, and then the person who has the condition themselves. Um, both of these groups have their own baggage, and it can be pretty negative, like we've touched on, um, and previous experiences that are sadly not always the best ones. So we have both of their feelings to account for, but that they're trying to work for the same goal. So it's like a bit of a relationship. We're like that we're mediating almost, because they can also be a bit frustrated with each other, because if you just did this one thing, you would feel so much better, and then got the patient on the other side going, but if you just listen to me, like, you've got that dynamic to account for, um, which has a lot of feelings, and that people have complicated feelings about things. And then you have to, no one wants to be reminded that they're sick is a huge thing that I've learned working in health tech. Um, and where we can't, it's not a fun thing. Like, I don't care like what anyone says or what you design, or it's, you're gonna be reminded that you're sick and that you should be doing things in a certain way to feel your best, but there's no perfect treatment or perfect routine or whatever, perfect anything to get you there. So it's like these little steps that you constantly have to be um, reminding people of, and there's a lot of education that goes into it. So to motivate somebody to make those changes in their lifestyle or their behavior, you first need to even convince them that this is something you should care about, or if they are convinced that they should care about it, you have to remind them of it, and it's not a fun reminder. It's there's so many little parts and details about health tech that I think are yeah, unique to health tech. Also, just the a patient's journey throughout life, like especially if they have a chronic condition, like you can have a person who has just been diagnosed and maybe has never had any contact with needing to take medication on the regular. Like, just that could be a huge, like, devastating thing for somebody. The different stigmas that are involved in certain diagnoses and conditions, and yeah, there's there's a lot of stuff I think that makes
Yeah.
health tech unique. What do you think?
Well, I think I remember you mentioning at some point, you phrased it as like we have to design a product that people actually don't want to use and convince them to use it. And I think that's such a good way of like making it click for people who don't work in health tech. Like some of those emotional and psychological challenges that we talked about with users. And I think that you covered all of it, like ditto, ditto, ditto. The only thing that I would add is when you mentioned all the all the users are involved, the primary, the secondary, but then also all the stakeholders involved.
Mm,
That adds a lot of red tape when you're working in health tech. And of course, there's other industries that are highly regulated if you work in finance or, but you do come up against quite a lot of regulation and compliance that you have to that create these requirements and these boundaries that you have to stick within, and it can also slow down progress a lot. So what you see, especially as you get these bigger enterprise companies, is it's so slow moving.
mm,
So I just think that it's important to mention the constant conversations and negotiations that are happening, both with what users need, but then also the stakeholders that you have, the other medical professionals, any sort of external medical clients you're working with, and then also obviously regulatory and compliance organizations, which all of this is important. Like that's, it's medical devices, of course they need to be vetted. But it's just something that, you definitely come up against while designing for within the space. Or I don't know if you feel that that's been part of the
no,
experience too.
100%, 100%. There, I
Yeah.
totally, yeah, yes. No, I completely agree, and it's so necessary that things in the healthcare space or health tech should be regulated. Um, I think there's ways that it could. We have an excellent regulatory person at MetaTuner who really tries to. I think her whole philosophy with that is to try to make sure that we're not like the developers and the designers at the company aren't doing like unnecessary documentation work that takes away from the work of actually designing and developing, which I think is excellent, and uh, and just helping us think in like risk, um, in terms of risks, which is a super also again another way to check yourself, like what's the worst that can happen with this, because yeah, also goes against the whole like break things mentality. And then, yeah, just to add to the other type of stakeholder, um, that here in Sweden, at least, we've got a healthcare system that's run in a way where um, it's not necessarily like the doctors and nurses treating you who decide how much money or how much resources to put into the healthcare system. It's the politicians. Um, So that's also like a unique thing, like the stakeholders where they've maybe never spoken to a patient before or don't know how what that person needs in their journey. And then you've got also uh, the family members, the friends of the patient that is being treated or who's experiencing an illness. Yeah, so I mean, just to conclude, it's like there's so many people besides just the patient involved in the experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I know that even with the family and friends thing, you have that collaborative feature in MetaTuner where you can
Hmm.
actually get, I don't know if you guys have expanded on it more, but initially it was just praise from family members for keeping up with your the self-management of your asthma. And I think that that touches on such an important aspect of management, which is that community and that motivation from loved ones. And again, just not feeling alone. So being able to, and I love the word used, like mediate those relationships between patient and provider and patient and their kind of own social network
Mm.
is really key. So I love that. But yeah, that's awesome. And okay, just to wrap it all up, what can the audience expect moving forward?
Ooh, I think you touched on a point like one of our pillars earlier that I really hope we can continue to include in all our episodes and guests and just throughout the whole podcast is to um to invite people into what did you call it, like check under the hood earlier? I thought
Oh
you worded it
yeah,
so well.
yeah, like pop open the hood or look under
Pop
the
open
hood.
the
Yeah.
hood. I love that because yeah, otherwise it's like okay, this new wearable sensor or whatever came out and like but what went into that? Like what are the stories behind why it's been designed a certain way? Because there hopefully are a lot of people like that are end users that were involved in the design decisions. Um, and I think just yeah, helping people show or see what's under the hood and explaining how we end up with the health tech products or services that we come into contact with when we're at our most vulnerable and maybe what can be improved in those processes. Um, I think will dissect the patient provider relationship and try to see which ways that can be improved because I think that's one of the key things in having a successful health tech product or just a healthcare system, just like how how do we make it easier for patients and providers to just trust each other and have honest conversations so that they can faster get that help that they need. And also looking at what just in general makes health tech design a really good experience or a really good solution, and also what things can make it a bad experience, and how to avoid those things. What are you hoping, or what do you think people can expect from the podcast? We're gonna do it. We're
Fingers
not
crossed.
hoping.
Yeah.
Yeah, hope we can. Oh well, no, we'll do it. We promise.
No, everything that you touched on, and I think I like the last piece you said too about, discovering kind of what makes good design, bad design. We haven't worked on every health tech solution out there, so it's going to be just as much us kind of sitting down and trying to parse through and talking with the designers, talking with the users, which this is something that Bella actually suggested, having real users of these products come onto the podcast. And I think it's genius because it does give us that key insight from the horse's mouth as far as what that lifestyle is to have whatever condition that they're dealing with and how that product actually impacts them. And of course, meeting with the designers to understand the process and how they compiled all that information and some of the challenges that they faced putting together their solution. And then, of course, the medical professionals as well, which we'll have on to kind of give more of that rounded medical expertise, because obviously the perspective that we're bringing is ultimately from the eye of the designers. And so, yeah, a lot of really good conversations. And I think we want people, regardless of if you're a designer, if you're in the medical profession, or if you're just someone who uses medical products, we want you to come away from these episodes feeling informed, but at the same time, that like good, excited feeling that you get after you have like an after work with friends, or you listen to a good podcast where there's a little banter. And we just want you to feel, inspired by the opportunities in this space. There's a lot of challenges and there's a lot of considerations, but there's also a lot that can be done that can really improve people's lives. And so, yeah, I think that's what we're aiming for, and that's where we'll get to.
And that's where we'll get to. Ooh, I would listen to this podcast. I'm excited
Yeah.
for it. Yeah, like you said,
Uh,
we're gonna learn a lot of stuff ourselves, so that's gonna be really interesting to dive into.
yeah, excited. All
Sweet.
right. I
Okay,
think I think that's a wrap.
we did it.
Should I stop recording?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.